Welcome back to the deep dive. We usually look back at what's happened, but today, well, we're doing something a bit different, maybe more ambitious.
Definitely more ambitious.
We're scrutinizing this really specific geopolitical prediction about how the Russia-Ukraine war might actually end. It's a deep dive into what one analyst thinks is the hidden mechanism being set up right now to force some kind of resolution.
That's right. We're looking at a position paper today by Lev Nemotin. And what makes it interesting, maybe even controversial, is that it predicts just one specific scenario. A peace deal where the CIA plays the really decisive role, but completely behind the scenes.
Right. So the mission for you listening is to really get your head around this predicted mechanism. It's called the dual-track strategy. The idea is basically to push both Kyiv and Moscow towards a settlement based more on, what's possible rather than what's ideal.
And there's a date.
Yeah, a hard deadline. The paper pins the whole operational climax on Friday, October 17th, 2025. That specific date.
And the author's whole idea starts from, recent history. He argues the CIA has been very quiet publicly on this.
Fancifully quiet, yeah.
And he thinks that silence actually signals intense covert activity. He points to the recent Gaza peace agreement as a kind of precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah, showing that if you coordinate intelligence, high-level diplomacy, and, crucially, timing, you can get these complex results pretty quickly. The theory is that success sort of energized the administration to try the same playbook in Eastern Europe.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this prediction. The dual-track strategy. It sounds like it needs perfect synchronization. Public pressure on Russia, private pressure on Ukraine, happening at the same time.
Exactly. That synchronization is, like you said, the whole ballgame. If one track slips, the whole prediction kind of falls apart.
So track one, pressure on Russia, that's the public part.
Right. Public pressure on Moscow. The paper says the U.S. will use the usual tools, but really ramped up and coordinated. We're talking expanded sanctions hitting key Russian sectors, maximum economic leverage. And then there's the missiles.
The long-range U.S. missile systems for Ukraine.
Yeah, the strategic deployment of those advanced systems.
Okay, those missiles. Let's pause on that.
Yeah.
The paper says they're not just about military aid, right? There's a dual function.
Precisely. They serve as a serious military deterrent, stopping Russia from making big gains on the battlefield. But just as importantly, they become a key piece of leverage in negotiations. A bargaining chip.
A very big bargaining chip.
It represents a threat of high-cost escalation for Russia. So while the U.S. is publicly approving these weapons deliveries, the source claims that, privately, Washington is signaling to Moscow.
Signaling what?
Signaling that the end goal here is stability in the region, not letting this spiral into some kind of existential proxy war with NATO. That private communication is key, apparently. It keeps a potential off-ramp open for Russia, even while they're cranking up the pressure.
Okay, so that's the squeeze on Moscow. Track two sounds trickier. Applying pressure to Ukraine, a country the U.S. is actively supporting. This is the private track aimed at Kyiv, specifically Zelensky's inner circle.
That's right. And the leverage mechanism predicted here is, an intelligence dossier.
The dossier.
Prepared by intelligence agencies. According to the source, it contains credible, specific allegations of corruption. Things like energy deals, political payoffs going back years.
Wow, okay. That's some heavy-duty political leverage. But the paper stresses something important here. It says the information in the dossier is factual, not made up.
Yeah.
Why is that distinction so critical for this theory to work?
Well, because if the information holds up, if it's verifiable, it gives the CIA and the U.S. administration political cover, plausible deniability.
I see.
They can say they're not spreading lies. They're just aware of certain facts that, if they came out, could be politically devastating for the current Ukrainian leadership.
And the justification for using that.
Pure pragmatism, according to the source. The global payoff, ending a horrific war, stabilizing Europe's energy, helping the world economy, that massive reward, is seen as justifying the, frankly, severe political risk of using this kind of leverage on an ally. It's realpolitik at its sharpest, really.
Okay, we need to pause here for a sec. The source mentions Zelensky's past corruption ties, pointing back to the Biden-era Ukrainian energy sector, mentioning Burisma, prosecutor dismissals. Some listeners might not immediately recall all that history. What's the paper referencing there to build this foundation?
Yeah, and just to be really clear, we're only reporting what the paper claims. We're not endorsing it. The author is tapping into a narrative that was very prominent around the 2020 U.S. election.
Right, involving Hunter Biden.
Correct. Hunter Biden's role on the board of Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company, and then the whole controversy around the firing of the Ukrainian prosecutor general Viktor Shokin. The paper basically asserts that there's documented evidence tied to all that, these long-running, politically sensitive issues.
And that's the core of the leverage.
That's the claim, because it potentially connects current issues in Ukraine's governance with these older controversies, making any exposure politically explosive.
Which makes the timeline absolutely crucial. This isn't supposed to be a sudden ambush. It's laid out as a sequence. What's the groundwork needed before that predicted October date?
It starts, according to the paper, with press leaks, carefully timed leaks.
Not the whole dossier at once.
No, not initially. These leaks would just sort of reference those past corruption links we just talked about, Burisma, payments, the dismissals. The goal, as the paper describes it, is to plant these ideas in the media, both internationally and within Ukraine itself.
Softening the ground, so to speak.
Exactly. Creating a public context so when or if the full dossier is eventually used as leverage, the political climate is already leaning towards accountability, towards maybe needing a change.
And all this builds towards that specific date, Friday, October 17th, 2025, tied to a specific event.
Yes, a planned meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky.
Okay, the timing. Why then?
It's critical. The meeting is predicted to be the operational peak. It's supposedly timed to happen right when the diplomatic buzz from the predicted Gaza deal is at its height. So the world's attention naturally shifts to Eastern Europe.
And the key move happens before that meeting.
That's the sequence laid out, yes.
Yeah.
The CIA prepares and delivers the dossier directly to Zelensky. Not publicly, but to him.
And how is it presented?
According to the paper, it's presented as sort of evidence showing the need for accountability, a guidepost, pushing him firmly towards accepting the peace terms that the U.S. has already decided on.
So that October 17th meeting becomes the moment of truth. Zelensky shows up, as the paper puts it, fully aware of the stakes. He knows what the U.S. holds over him.
That's the idea. He understands the immense personal and political leverage. And the U.S. isn't predicted to just gently suggest things. They present the peace plan as a kind of take it now or lose all momentum deal. Non-negotiable, essentially.
It's intense pressure. Except this imperfect peace, which includes security guarantees or face what? Continued war, loss of Western support, and the dossier coming out.
That's the predicted choice. An imperfect but state-preserving end backed by Western guarantees versus continued conflict, likely dwindling support, and guaranteed political ruin from the dossier's exposure.
Okay, let's shift gears to the actual prize, the result of all this maneuvering. The terms of the peace plan itself. This is where the prediction gets really concrete. What are the main, probably toughest terms for Ukraine?
Well, the immediate one, and likely the most painful, involves territory. Ukraine would have to formally recognize the reality in Crimea, the post-2014 situation.
Just acknowledge it.
Formal recognition. And then the eastern border regions, the current conflict zones, those would be subject to negotiation. The paper suggests settlements possibly involving internationally monitored local votes, referenda, or very specific demilitarized zones along a new line of contact.
And the big strategic shift, security. What happens to their NATO aspirations? That's been central.
That's perhaps the biggest concession predicted. A formal declaration of neutrality, or at least permanently withdrawing the goal of joining NATO.
And that's required for Russia to even consider it.
The source argues yes, absolutely. It's a non-starter for Moscow otherwise. But this withdrawal wouldn't leave Ukraine unprotected. It would be replaced by a new security framework, backed by the U.S., with strong international guarantees and defense pacts, but structured explicitly outside of NATO.
And aid. Economic, military?
That would become conditional. Phased in, strictly tied to verified proof that Ukraine is complying with all parts of the agreement.
The paper apparently gets quite detailed, breaking the plan into 4 clause categories. Can you summarize those? What's the basic blueprint?
Yeah, we can group them by what they do. First, the political clauses. These set up the mechanisms for handling future disagreements, defining how those international referenda would work, or setting up permanent demilitarized zones. Then, the military clauses.
That's stopping the fighting.
Immediately. Cessation of all offensive actions, withdrawal of heavy weapons under monitoring, and rules for both sides holding back on using long-range systems. Mutual restraint.
Okay, and the last 2 categories sound like the incentives. The carrot and stick.
Pretty much. The economic clauses offer the carrot. Phased lifting of some sanctions on Russia. That's key. Plus, significant reconstruction funds for Ukraine.
but with oversight.
Strict U.S. and EU oversight on all reconstruction money, precisely to address those corruption concerns. And critically, reopening regional trade routes immediately. Finally, security. This is both the stick and the safety net.
The guarantees again?
Yes.
Okay.
The U.S.-backed guarantee of Ukraine's independence within whatever new borders are agreed upon, supported by that new neutral treaty-based defense structure we talked about. Outside NATO.
It's a huge, complex plan relying on perfect timing and immense pressure. So, the big question. Why does the author think both sides would actually accept this, given the major concessions involved for both?
Well, for Ukraine, the prediction is acceptance comes directly from that CIA pressure, the dossier. It forces the leadership into a choice where state survival, backed by those Western guarantees, becomes the priority over holding out for ideal terms. The guarantees make the bitter pill easier to swallow.
They balance out the personal ultimatum.
That's the idea. And for Russia, the prediction isn't that they suddenly trust the U.S., it's cold calculation.
Pragmatism.
Pure pragmatism. Russia gets two huge wins. Formal acceptance of its position on Crimea, and crucially, a clear path to easing its economic isolation. Phased sanctions relief, normalization of energy markets. It's framed as a practical exit ramp for them, too, based on enforced compromise, a kind of forced win-win.
Okay, let's look ahead. If this scenario actually happens, if this peace deal is orchestrated successfully, what's the predicted global fallout? The impact?
The immediate impact predicted is pretty significant. De-escalation, obviously. Then a gradual return to normal trade patterns, and crucially for Europe, stabilization of energy markets. That's huge.
And geopolitically?
A major realignment, the paper suggests. The U.S. would potentially regain a lot of credibility as the world's main power broker, the chief peace negotiator.
Right. Pulling off deals for both Gaza and Ukraine within one presidential term. That would give the administration huge political capital, wouldn't it? Looking ahead to, say, the 2026 midterms. A legacy built on ending major conflicts.
Absolutely. That's clearly part of the predicted calculation. The core theory underpinning this whole scenario is that success here isn't about ideology, it's about hard realism. It prioritizes intelligence work over public diplomacy and uses controlled pressure, controlled exposure to force a peace deal where traditional methods completely stalled.
A quiet, behind-the-scenes orchestration.
Designed to force a pragmatic outcome through very specific leverage points.
Which really leaves us, and you, the listener, with a pretty profound final thought, doesn't it? If this predicted peace framework is built, as the paper lays out, on this foundation of covert pressure, personal leverage, serious accountability concerns, rather than just pure diplomatic agreement and goodwill, does that foundation make the peace itself more stable in the long run? Or less?
That's the big question, isn't it? Does the way peace is achieved affect its durability? Something definitely worth thinking about.